Officially, today's sheet is on the middle paragraph of page Lamed Vav, right? Ner mitzvah, vodרך, Chayim, Tוכxת. So today is a ner mitzvah, and tomorrow I'm starting to teach Achtos. So ner mitzvah is this little paragraph in the middle of Lamed Vav, and then it's the end of Perek Gimel. I suppose you could say that it's the bottom of Mem Vav and the top of Mem Zayin. About halfway through Mem Vav, he says, "V'zeu sha'idei neir mitzvah yovel l'teira eir, v'zeu sh'masai machakach v'derech Chayim Techachas Mosar." Now, the truth is, he already mentions neir mitzvah in the bottom of page Mem Daled, which makes it like 3 pages before the end of Perek Gimel. It's very difficult to know exactly where it is. In Perek Gimel of the Maimer. So about halfway through the Perek, which is on the bottom of page Mem Daled, he's 6 lines from the bottom. He says, "V'zeu ki ner mitzvah v'teira eir." But then again on page Mem Vav, halfway down the page, he goes back to ner mitzvah v'teira eir v'derech Chayim Techachas Mosar, and that's probably more where it belongs, where it is. Now, let me put it to you this way. Let me say this. B'derech Hagdama. There's a sefer called Shalah, Shnei Luchas HaBrit, one of the most famous Sifrei Machshava, which is written al Pi Kabbalah. That's very, very choshev, very, very angenim, and very popular. I cannot say that I learned the Shalah, but I learned the Shalah on Teda. Shalah is a massive sefer. You've never seen anything like it. It's huge. But there's a section on Chumash. It's a very interesting sefer because he talks about all kinds of different things. He has Teda Shebeksav, he has Teda Sheval Peh, and then he goes all the Yomim Tevim. It's such a fascinating sefer. The Shalah is such a fascinating man. The most fascinating thing about the Shalah is that when you read him, and you can almost hear the Rebbe talking, he knows the whole Torah, like you know how many fingers you have, the deepest to the simplest, and he has a capacity to explain the deepest things, and he also has a capacity to say the simplest things. And everything is he's so much thinking about the person who's listening to him, as a verstehen. It's not about him sounding smart, that he should be well understood. It's extraordinary. Shalah is a very special sefer. And from what I understand was he lived in Eretz Yisrael, lived in Chutz La'aretz, and he moved to Eretz Yisrael, and he sent the Shalah as a gift, as a tzavah to his mishpacha. It was meant to be a familial thing. And they went ahead and printed it, not mamish right away, but a generation or 2 later. I don't know exactly. It's probably 2 generations after the Arizal. He had the Arizal as Shin Lamed Gimel. You're Ben Achmed Shlomo. All the Leviim Roberts, a lot of them at least, all the big tzaddikim, and when they printed the Shalah, they gave Tachvatat. Do you imagine? The Arizal was Shin Lamed Gimel. Yeah, Shin Lamed Gimel is 1573. The Arizal passed away 1573. Tachvatat is 1648. So you're talking between Shin Lamed Gimel and Tachvatat Arum Zibitzik Yor, 70 years. So the Shalah lived someplace in between that. The Shalah had already passed away. I don't even think it was his children. I think it was his grandchildren who printed his Sefer Be'esis Merabah. It says in the Kutei Deburim that when they printed,
the first print, I think.
Who? From Tafches? 1648. When they printed the Shalah, the Fiedeke writes in a Sikha, when they printed the Shalah the first time, Be'esis Merabah, there were Gezeres Tachvatat. Could you imagine? You print a Sefer of Kabbalah and thousands of Jews get killed. What's the connection? The Fiedeke says it's in a Sikha. In other words, the Achrayis, to print a Sefer of Timus, but the Ikka was they printed Be'esis Merabah. Then it says weiter that they printed it again 50 years later, exactly, in Shas Tov Nun Ches, 1698. And nothing happened. And nothing happened. Why did nothing happen? Because the Baal Shem Tov was born that year. The Friedrich Rebbe, being Megala Seides HaTeira is not poshet. You know, we don't understand these things, but for the tzaddikim, you read Hakdama to the Zeir. There's a Zeir. The first time Hakdama was printed was the year Shin Chof. Shin Chof is 1560, a little bit before that Arizal came to Tzfaz. And there's a Hakdama from Yitzchak Dilot. You could read it. It's printed in all the Zeirs. And the pachad, the fear by printing Zeir, why Afal Pikein they should print it. There was such pachad to printing Sfarim of Timus HaTeira. These were tzaddikim, Gemuri. We're talking about malachim, not normal people, b'chlal. And anyway, the Shalah was one of those Sfarim. the structure, the design of the entire Sefer from the beginning to the end is this pasuk. Everything goes in three things: Neir mitzvah, Teire eid, and Derech Chayim. Jede Sache, as geht es. Neir mitzvah, Teire, jede Sache is as. Like I said, I didn't learn the whole Shalah. I only learned the Shalah on Chumash. I learned the whole Chumash. All five. If you got from Breishis till V'zeis HaBracha. Sometimes he has longer, sometimes he has shorter. Very interesting. Very different, very creative, very original. It's so much like the Rebbe. It's just extraordinary. So the Teire Eid is the deepest part. All the Kabbalah stuff, all the Pnimis statements in the Teire Eid. And the Neir Mitzvah, Poshet tells you Heiros Lamaise. What mitzvahs you learn from this parasha, what mitzvahs you learn from this parasha, and so forth. And the Derech Chayim, something fell on the floor, I think, yeah? And the Derech Chayim is Poshet Musar. Derech Chayim is Poshet Musar. You have to fix this midah, you have to fix midah, so that's the style. And the whole Shalah follows this design of Neir Mitzvah Teire Eid, but Derech Chayim Techachas Musar. Now this kama v'kama, my morich sidis, this kama v'kama, my morich sidis, that go on the posuk Neir Mitzvah Teire Eid, Derech Chayim Techachas Musar. There's even the Maschas, Neir Mitzvah. This Maimon doesn't start Ki Neir Mitzvah, this Maimon starts Tanaban Ner Chanukah. Now just to give you an explanation, B'kitz and Nimratz, that Rabbeim have a very, very rigid approach to my morich sidis. When it comes to the Maimorim, there's something very, very rigid, very conservative about the Rabbeim. The Rabbeim, B'chlal Maimorim, are all the Alter Rebbes. And when I say B'chlal Maimorim, all the Alter Rebbes, there's maybe 10% that are not. And the 10% that are not, most of them are Mistamad and Tzemach Tzedeks. And then there's one or two or three that each Rebbe said that are his own. You know, the Rebbe has Maimorim that you can't find before. But any person who's familiar with the Hishtalshus of Morich Hasidus, and today you don't have to be a Rebbe to know this because the books are on the shelves. You have all the Sfarim, all the Alter Rebbes, all the Mittel Rebbes, all the Tzemach Tzedeks. You see, the Alter Rebbe said, you know, it says in Ayem Yem that the Alter Rebbe prepared the Teire, look at the Teire from 2,000 Maimorim. We have more than 2,000 Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe. In print. We have, B'Peil Mamish, in our bookshelves. More than two, which is an amazing thing. You know what Chassidim would have done 150 years ago? For 2,000 Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe, they had two. They come and look at the Teire and Teire. And the Alter Rebbe said Maimorim during his lifetime. And the Mittel Rebbe wrote them, and the Tzemach Tzedek wrote them. Each one in a different style. The Mittel Rebbe wrote them with Hezber. And the Tzemach Tzedek wrote them with short notes. And sometimes the short notes of the Tzemach Tzedek and the longer Hezber, the Mittel Rebbe saying exactly the same thing. But they had two shittas. The Mittel Rebbe shitta was explain it. And the Tzemach Tzedek shitta was, if you're going to explain it, people are going to forget which is yours and which is the Alter Rebbe's. So he was very makatzer. But the Ruben Kukulam, any Mami you pick up, 90 times out of 100, take a Mami from the Rebbe, any Mami from the Rebbe, it's based on a Mami from before. And some Maimorim, you can literally find 7 Rebbes. The Alter Rebbe's version, the middle, the same Maimon Mamish. And you can push a journey. I spent a year or so doing this. And you see, it's incredible to see how loyal the Rabbeim are. The Rabbeim don't say Maimorim, they repeat Maimorim. The Alter Rebbe said Maimorim. Now if you would meet the Alter Rebbe, he would say, I don't say Maimorim either. It's Al Teres HaMagid. But there's an incredible Einarech between how the Magid said it and the way the Alter Rebbe said it. Even in the Alter Rebbe itself, there's a big Einarech from the earlier years to the later years. So one of the aspects of this rigidity is that they don't make up original Dibur HaMaschals. Dibur HaMaschals of Maimorim and the Alter Rebbe's, rare occasions to Tzemach Tzedek. There's a Maimon that the Rebbe said once, Tzur to Uda. It's based on a Maimon from the Friedrich Rebbe, and then the Rebbe said the Maimon, he took a whole sikh afterwards. Whoever heard such a Dibur HaMaschal? And the Rebbe says it goes back to the Rebbe Marash.
Why is this?
Why is it? Because Chassidus Chabad is Alter Rebbe's. Chassidus Chabad is the Alter Rebbe's. Alter Rebbe was given, just like the Chassidus was given to the Baal Shem Tov. And we all have the Baal Shem Tov's Chassidus. Chassidus Chabad is Alter Rebbe's. All the Rabbeim, you know that until our Rebbe, when the Rabbeim said Rebbe, they didn't mean their father. When the Friedrich Rebbe said the Rebbe, he meant Alter Rebbe. When the Rebbe Rashab said the Rebbe, he meant the Alter Rebbe. The only Rebbe who used the words the Alter Rebbe was our Rebbe, because the Rebbe, the Rayatz, the Friedrich Rebbe was the Rebbe. By the Friedrich Rebbe, when he wanted to talk about the Rebbe Rashab, he said the Tate, or the Zayde, or the Elter Zayde. The Tzemach Tzedek was the Tzemach Tzedek, the Mittel Rebbe was the Mittel Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe was Rebbe. Because it's Mamish Emes, that Chassidus Chabad is the Mountain Rebbe. So you have Maimorim that actually start Neir Mitzvah V'Teir, Ki Neir Mitzvah V'Teir, which means that there's a Maimorim from the Alter Rebbe Oichet Hazoi Bepashtis. This Maimer starts telling about Hanukkah, but you'll see this. The more you learn, the more you'll realize that when my modern Mesichas are very different. When it comes to my modern, there's a design. There's a very careful design, and there's an incredible loyalty to the Alter Rebbe's Ruach HaKodesh. Whatever came out of the Alter Rebbe's mouth, this is it. And we go down these paths, and we develop, and we expound, and we open up, and we clarify, and we elaborate, and we deepen. But it's all Malten Rebbe's. So, Ne'er Mitzvah V'Teira Vodech Chaim Tachachas Mosar is a pretty popular pasuk in Chassidus. Now, just to give you a case in point, and again, I'm not expecting you to know this, but I'm just sharing this with you because to me this is important. The Rebbe gave out Kuntas Eitz HaChaim, Chof Marchesh Ven Tofshin Nun Aleph, I think. The Rebbe gave out Kuntas Eitz HaChaim, and I was already married at that point. And at one fine day, I had a great epiphany. The Rebbe was giving out Kontresim every 2 months. Between the years Tofshin Mem Tes and the years Tofshin Beis, the Rebbe gave out maybe 20 Svarim. It's not normal. It just gave, printed a sefer, made 10,000 copies, and gave them away. And at one point, I made the decision that the Rebbe gives me a sefer, I should learn it. I remember when I was in Marstan, Membeis, the Rebbe gave us a Tanya. The Rebbe gave us a Tanya the first time. And I was in Marstan 6 months of Chakel. So right after Pesach, I went back to Marstan, and the Melech verbringt with us. And the Melech gave us over the head. The Rebbe gave you a Tanya Yiralf Nissen. Today is whatever, Chof Ches, Chof Tes Nissen was 2 weeks later. How many pages of that Tanya did you learn? Was the Rebbe gave you Tanya to put on the shelf? I was like, whoa, yeah, it's not, it's Taket. The Rebbe gave me a Tanya I should put on the shelf. So whenever the Rebbe Kuntis, I learned it. Some better, some worse, I learned it. The Rebbe gave us twice a Tanya. We got a Tanya Yud Shvat Tofshin Nun, a Yitas Kislev Tofshin and Alf. If just learned the whole Tanya cover to cover. I have for the Rebbe 4 Tanyas. 4, what am I going to do with them? Take them to my grave. My children get married, I give them a Tanya. Anyway, so the Rebbe Kuntis Chaim, the whole Kuntis. Kuntis Eitz HaChaim goes on this pasuk. Ki Ne'er Mitzvah V'Teira Vodech Chaim Tachachas Mosar. Now, when you learn this Maimer, and you guys will get to it, when you get to the bottom of Memvav, the top of Mem Zayin, you'll see how it's very, very hard to understand b'diuk what each one is. There's Ne'er Mitzvah, there's Teira Eid, and Vodech Chaim. There's 3 things. What's Ne'er Mitzvah, what's Teira Eid, and what's Vodech Chaim? It's a little bit hard to discern because the Maimer is a bit vague. Sometimes he says Ne'er Mitzvah means this, and then sometimes he says Vodech Chaim means this. So to say with certitude that I know exactly what the Rebbe wants in this Maimer, I can't tell you. But B'Klolus, the Inyan is, in other words, this is how it is all over Chassidus. The Seder really is Vodech Chaim, Ne'er Mitzvah, and Teira Eid. In Avoda, first comes Vodech Chaim, then comes Ne'er Mitzvah, and then comes Teira Eid. Even though in the Pasuk you have Ne'er Mitzvah, and you have Teira Eid and Vodech Chaim. To explain this in prostavet, in down-to-earth words, in language of every person, okay? We live in Elam Hazeh. You and I, we live in Elam Hazeh. We live in Elam Hazeh. We live in Elam Hazeh. Yeah, what does that mean? We live in a world where there's zero elikus, zero gil elikus. Bemis, Adei Demais. We don't see godliness in the street. You see halamas vestadim. You see people whose whole mitzvahs is gashmis v'chumris, and every day that passes, their life becomes more gashmis, more chumris, more having, more things, more pleasure, more collections. It's so difficult to find space for our neighbors. Yeah, Baruch Hashem, we live in America, not in Russia. In Russia, we were poor and broke, so we had beruchnias by default. If you have no gashmis, we have so much gashmis. It's a huge burden. It's a huge burden, huh?
There's tons of food in Russia.
Tons of food in Russia.
Ask Talbot.
He's being sarcastic. You got it. But you were under the Soviets. Under the Tsar was even worse. Yidden under the Tsar had it worse than in Gashmias. In Ruchnias, I'm not speaking, but with the Yevem was Essen. They were so impoverished. They lived subsistence lives. They had a field and they planted in a farm, and that's what they ate. That's it. It wasn't like they made money. They had no jobs. There was nothing to do. You live in America, Baruch Hashem. There's so much opportunity, and but there's also so much desire. As they gate us, the teva dvarim is ein adam yetzi me'elami v'chatzi tavos le'biyadi. So the mil hazeh. So there's 2 different issues here. The first issue is you got to be a Jew. What should practically speaking be a Yid? You have to keep Teira mitzvah dem shegehes. And the second thing is that you have to feel like a Jew. In other words, you can go through your whole life, never do a single Avoda, be completely frum, and the ganze meis is drucken, has no chayes. At all. Like the Sipar HaYadua, the famous story in Hilgam Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov went to Frankfurt. Baal Shem Tov traveled with Vodderech. So you can't ask on the Baal Shem Tov how he got there. Baal Shem Tov went to Frankfurt. Frankfurt was a German city. And during the times that Baal Shem Tov, the Yidden was still frum. Within 2 or 3 generations, it was not that way. But in the time, they didn't even frum. But they were Germans. What's Germans? The same thing you see today. Very precise, very exact, very responsible, very on time, very efficient. But dry as brittle, dry as dried out bone. Nothing. So the Baal Shem Tov goes into a shul, a great shul, a sheina temple azar, and he says to the mispalalim, I can't be in this shul. So they say to the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, favos nit. So the Baal Shem Tov says, because the room is packed with Eises HaTeira v'Atfila, the room, please stop talking, the room is full of Eises HaTeira v'Atfila, and there's no room for me. So the people said to the Baal Shem Tov, thanks for the compliment. Our shuls get packed with Eises HaTeira v'Atfila. The Baal Shem Tov says, you don't even understand, I just gave you an insult. What's the insult? Because it says in Zayah, it's brought in Tanya Kaddish, when Yid learns Torah and does mitzvah, he's supposed to go to Gan Eden. Parcha le'ela is supposed to ascend upwards. But what affects the Parcha le'ela? Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. The passion of Avodas Hashem. If you learn Torah and you do mitzvahs and it's totally trucken, I'm not even going to say mitzvah nashim u'lamada. It's not like you don't care. But you have no life, kalt. It's like Alter Rebbe says, this shul, there's tons of Eiz HaTeira v'Atfila, because everyone is so pinklach, everyone's so precise, everyone davens, everyone learns, yeah, but there's no chayas. So there's 2 nisyonis in our world. The first and most basic nisyon is you have to push a bifrum, not make any pshadas, not make any compromise, and he the mitzvah, and so on. And the second is you want to experience Hashem. The fact of life is, if you want to sustain your Yiddishkeit in this world, it's not enough to do it, you have to have joy, you have to have life. So the way the Maimer goes is as follows. Neir mitzvah is doing the mitzvahs. And Teira Eid is the chayes of the mitzvahs. Now the language of the Maimer is that Teira Eid, it's a big pilpul, but Teira Eid is simcha shel mitzvah. In this Maimer, the Rebbe says, you can experience atzmas amhus. The whole thing is, when you do this bonus nachas Hashem, you want to have the Eibishter. If you think about the Eibishter long enough, hard enough, you want to have him. And the answer in this mime, if you want to have the Eibishter, is obviously the simple answer is you have Hashem into Yiddishkeit. When Yid learns saying das mitzvah, he has the Eibishter. But if you want to experience the Eibishter, this is the infant simcha shel mitzvah. The joy of mitzvahs is the experience of the Eibishter. That's the yesod. That's the shtel of the mime. So you have 2 things. Neir mitzvah is I do what the Eibishter said. Teira Eid is an addition of the Eibishter. I experience the joy of the Eibishter, the light of godliness. Just like a candle. But you all learned that small paragraph, and that makes a whole pilpul, which is hard to understand why he's so verkocht in it. What does it mean, the cup? What does it mean, the fuel and the wick that go inside the cup? But one thing is for sure, the candle is not fire. It's the conductor of the fire. Whether it's the indirect conductor of fire, which is the kli, or direct conductor of the fire, which is the wick or the oil, is a pilpul. But one thing Neir mitzvah is not, it's not the fire itself. The fire itself is a davar achas, a davar ruchni. And derech agav, I just want to tell you a klal, that all over Chassidus, anytime they bring the mashal of Neir, and there's 2 classic places where they bring the mashal of Neir. Neir havaya nishmas adam, and Neir mitzvah teira eir. The neshama is a candle, and mitzvahs are a candle. In Tanya, only in Tanya, when he says Neir, he means the fire. Like you have in Tanya Perikites. All over Chassidus, in Teresh Balpev Chassidus, Neir means the kli. Neir doesn't mean the fire, it means the conductor of the fire. The fire itself is Teira Eid. So the Pasuk says Neir mitzvah, you have to do mitzvahs. And I guess you could say technically included in Neir mitzvah is the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah. And then there is a schar. The schar for Neir mitzvah is Teira Eid. Teira Eid means that it doesn't remain dry, it becomes illuminated, it becomes lichtig, it becomes vadim, it becomes freilach. Yiddishkeit requires the neshama. And Yid thinks about how ein eid milvadeh, and he desires to have in his life ein eid milvadeh, and the eitzah is, you have Hashem when you learn Teira and do mitzvahs, But when you learn Torah and do mitzvahs, b'simcha, you're not only doing what the Eibishter said, in some limited way, kvayachol, you're experiencing what the Eibishter is. And that's the Taish Neir Mitzvah Torah. So the Neir is the conductor of the fire. The Oid is the fire itself. That's why in this Maimed, he says, make it very clear, that Neir is not the flame, Neir is the cup, Lanzish, Belaz, or the Shemen Upsila. And then you have a Torah, this is the Lichtigkeit. Nu, Eibazei, what's Vodera Chaim Tachachas Mosar? Which is the end of the Pasuk. If Neir Mitzvah is, but I live as a Jew practically. And Torah is that in addition to living as a Jew practically, because of how I am Jewish, I'm experiencing light or inspiration or a joy of Judaism. So what's Derech Chaim Tachachas Mosar? So without beating around the bush, because there's no time to circle the bush too many times, this is called Eskafia. The Rebbe Rashab establishes as a Yisod. If you want to be a Yid, and you want to be a Lebedik Yid, you got to let go of Gashmias. You can't have it all. If you want to have all the luxuries of Gashmias, but there's a kvetch. And not only you want to have all the luxuries of Gashmias, you want to koch on all the luxuries of Gashmias. They're going to be important to you. You're not going to be able to experience the Ruchnis Nolikus. That's the pshat in the pasuk. That's the pshat in the pasuk in this Maimed, and that's the pshat ba'arich and gedel. The kuntes Chayim was made for the Bacham and Tepchatmimah. In the Maimed, the whole idea of the Maimed of kuntes Chayim, which goes on this pasuk, Kinei Mitzvah Vatera Avoda Chaim Tachas Mosar. You want to be a Chassidish Yid, there's a cost, and the cost is a skafia. You can't give yourself everything you want. When a person gives himself everything he wants, so you can have everything you want. And you can be a from Yid, but Chayis you're not going to have. Teira Eid is Lebedikait. Teira Eid is Simcha Shal Mitzvah. Teira Eid is Simcha of everything. In order for a person to have Teira Eid, the Neir Mitzvah has to come along with a Derech Chaim Tachachas Mosar. This is what the Pasuk says. Derech Chaim, the way to have life. In other words, the way that Yiddishkeit shouldn't be a boring thing that you just do technically. But the Yiddishkeit should be a living thing, which is a priority to me. You have to chachas musa. And he explains in the end of page Memvav, top of page Memzayin, he gives the dogma for Mishpat Tzedakah. Every Gashmizdek engagement you have has to be evaluated. Do I need it? Do I not need it? It's like Derech Chaim Techachas Musa. And in other words, the beginning of the Maimed is Chanukah. The end of the Maimed is right to Chanukah. Inside that is the Neir Mitzvah V'Teira Eir Vodera Chaim Tachachas Mosar. It's page Lamed Vav, and then it's page Mem Vav and Mem Zayin, the two flanks from Mizak. And what's the Teichen Advarim on these pages? That the Rebbe says that in order for the fire of Torah to ignite the candle of my mitzvahs, you have to have it even as kafir, Derech Chaim Tachachas Mosar. And just to finish, I'm going to say a word, and I'm not going to take long. And the word is as if you want, we all talk about what's become of the frum world. Yeah, the frum world came to Europe. The frum people came to America mostly after the Holocaust. Now, don't misunderstand. Millions of frum people came here before the Holocaust, but for all kinds of reasons, they didn't stay. Didn't last. I mean, the percentage of Yidden who came to America and remained frum is tragically low. Tragically low. Most people came to America within a generation or two, for sure, lost their Torah mitzvah Yiddishkeit. And of course, the real issue was that there was no chinuch. But why these poor decisions were made after the war? From Yidden came to America. Haredim came to America after the war. They established Haimish Kehilas. You know, you have Lubavitch, you have Bobiv, you have Satmar, you have Vishnitz, you have the Misnagdim that are Haredim and so on. They're all after the war, right? No, how many generations are we since then? My father came here as a boy. That means my grandfather came as an immigrant. My grandfather had a whole career in Russia. He dropped it, came to America to be frum and free. He never made a living afterwards, but he lived in America. So for me, it's 3 generations. For my children, it's 4 generations. Right? For some of you, it's probably 5. For some of you, it's probably, in other words, even if your parents came after the war, yeah, if your grandfather was older, if your great-grandfather is older, and your grandfather was around the age of my father, a little bit younger, so your grandfather's a couple of years older than I am. So it could be 5 generations. When we came to America, we were very poor. And we were also very religious. We came from a very frum world. So the first generation of American Jews that came after the war were incredibly erlich. They're very frum. They really were. And they also had good midas. They still had the old tradition. They didn't have Americans have ugly midas. Americans are arrogant, and they think it's a mitzvah. So the first generation that came here was very beautiful. Now their children were raised by those people. So their children were really the first generations of Americans, but they had all the hang-ups, all the mishigasan they inherited from their ancestors. The fears and the paranoia and the imaginary mishigasan, yeah? And the stuckness. And there was an upside to that stuckness. The upside to that stuckness was they were also frum, but a lot of them were frum because they were afraid as opposed to really being frum. Think of the next generation. The next generation said, you know what, my father's stuck, my grandfather's stuck, I'm not stuck, I'm an American. Americans are free. Americans know how to laugh. Americans don't have all these hang-ups, these paranoias and these fears. I don't want them. So you had a big generation gap. Sometimes it was the second generation, sometimes it was the third generation, yeah? So what happens? Become more and more American. If you have more and more American, Yiddishkeit's less important to you, and Gashmis is more important to you. But it happens very slowly. We're from Yidden, we're Haredi Yidden. I remember as a kid, all the Ungarish Yidden came to America, none of them had beards. All the Hungarians that I knew who had numbers from Auschwitz, all had numbers, every single one of them. I saw 1,000 numbers in my life. Had no beards. Then their children started to get married in the early 70s when I was a kid. The children went to yeshivas, the children had beards, the children put on streimlach. So these Ungarische Yidden, for their first sons married, they put on a kind barad, they would start trimming it. They started shaving, they started trimming. For the second child, they grew the beard full. And by the time the last child got married, they put on a kapate, a bekeshe, and a streimel. But you have to understand, the children looked more Jewish than they were, but the parents were much more Jewish than the children were. The parents were children from Yidden from Amo. European Jews, it was shalei be'erech. The street, the water was holy. It was the inarech between pre-war and post, unbelievable. So what's happening to us, as a generation to generation, is we're not as full of psychological fears and mishigasen. We also don't have the sincerity and the frumkeit that they had. And there's another factor. We want what America has to offer. We want nice houses, we want nice cars, we want nice clothes, we want to eat good food. And none of it's a sin. It's not an Avoda. It's just what Americans do. Americans are not poor. Americans think what they call the American dream. Everybody has, I want also. And you know what? It's not a bad thing. It's written no place in Yiddishkeit that you have to suffer and be poor. Here's the problem. We don't appreciate the cost of taivas heter. We don't understand that when you enjoy gashmias, it's at the expense of enjoying ruchnias. It is. So there's a balance. You know, a very chassidish Yid doesn't allow himself a piece of chocolate. A very, very, what they call Chabad light, or whatever kind of light, Bob of light, Satma light, Lakewood light, I don't care what kind of light. If it's permitted, don't tell me I can't have it. But we don't evaluate properly the cost of materialism. When you're from, and you're the president of your congregation, and you sit in Mizrach, and you pay for chazak, and they give you covet because they're a couple of dollars, but you run 3 or 4 times a year, spend the weekend or a whole weekend on vacation, who knows where. And the food has to be the most expensive, and the house has to be the nicest, and the clothing has to be the best, and the car has to be the... Every one of those things is a piece of your head. You know how much effort it takes to buy a car? How much effort to choose a restaurant and good food, and then you have to think about it, and you like it, and you don't like it. And everything takes a piece of you. Those pieces of you, totally mutter, take a piece of you that could be involved in thinking about the Eibishter. And by the time you're done, there's so little left. You want to know the source of OTD. There's a lot of sources of OTD. We're all blaming it on psychological problems. We're blaming it on abuse. We're blaming it on neglect. And there's a fact. All things are true. But nobody wants to identify the 200-pound gorilla in the room. The issue is we're megushim. We're megushim. We want good things, and there's nothing wrong with wanting good things. But when you koch in the good things, there's no room. You come to shul, and you're thinking about your business. In the middle of Shminas, you're looking on your cell phone. It's not so bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not so bad. But when you add up all the not so bads, there's big Avedis, it's like thick dark clouds, and then the skinny little teeny Avedalach. But if you have enough of them, it's darker than a big cloud. What's happened to us as a community is we have, and I don't mean Lubavitch, I mean the whole from world, is we become, Baruch Hashem, we're rich. You guys don't understand what it means. I didn't get a new pair of clothes in my entire life until my bar mitzvah. And you know what the pell is? None of my friends did either. We didn't think anything of it. My third biggest expense, besides for wedding, after Schalimud, and food, is clothes. We didn't spend money on clothes. We took hand-me-downs. That's how we lived. You can't do that anymore. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people who spend more money on clothing than we do, but you have to have, you must have. But you have to understand that just like you have to have nice food and a nice house and a nice car and nice clothes, you have to have a rishon to Eibishter. So the pasuk says, "Vodech Chaim Tachachas Mosar." If you don't incorporate into the scheme, if you don't incorporate into the model, Poshet Eskafia, I don't need this, and I don't want it, and I'm not going to have it. Why? Because I Poshet want space for the Eibishter. Then I'm telling you, one of the reasons that the kids are flying out is because there's no, Yiddishkeit's not important. We're frum. And some of us are called Heimish frum. We're very frum, but it's all tradition. There's very, very little. There are not a lot of people you could meet today who have a personal interest in Yiddishkeit metachayes. There are. But so many of us frum people, I'm not talking about, I'm speaking with the ones with the beards and payas, the really edlecha, the way they look bechitzonius, but their life is about money, their life is about things. And even if they go to Ashir, that's not where their koch is. The pasuk says, if you don't have Vodech Chaim Tachachas Mosar, the Neir mitzvah is not going to bring the Teira Eir. You'll do the mitzvahs, but it'll poshut be mitzvahs anoshim ulumad, no chayas. And it's unsaid, your kids are not going to do it. If you're frum, technically, your children are going to say, I'll be technically not from. And that's just my image. That in order for the Neir mitzvah to lead to a Teira Eir, that your Yiddishkeit should have joy and warmth, I should be a Yid mit a heart. You have to give from Gashmias. Yidden in Europe didn't have to give from Gashmias because it was taken away from them by Goyim. And Goyishkeit, like you said, there was so much bread in Russia. But to Baruch Hashem, we have the American Nisayan. And in order to pass the American Nisayan, daf machna cheshbon. And the cheshbon has to be, if I don't need something, I don't want it. You know why? Because if I'm a rich man, and instead of spending my money on material things, I spend my time and money in bringing into my home a joy of Yiddishkeit, I'm guaranteeing my children are going to be the way they're supposed to be. That's not Neir mitzvah. That's not Teira Eir. That's Vodech Chaim. And what's Vodech Chaim? Teichachas Mosar. Make a cheshbon with yourself and give yourself a criticism that says, I can have this, I can afford this, do I need it? And it's not for free. Having a lot of Gashmis has a price. It's a price when it comes to davening with hearts and and you see it in the next generation. The kids do what their parents do, just better. That's very simple. If the parents kochen Gashmis, the children kochen Gashmis more. And the victim, the fallout is Teira mitzvahs, Yiddishkeit, Chassidus. And that's what this Maimon is saying, that in order for the Neir mitzvah, you're frum, to bring Teira Eir, to lebedikait, you have to have a skafia. Vodech Chaim Tachachas Mosar. Okay, l'chaim v'levrach.